Many of us use labels to describe ourselves like empath or anxious, introvert, workaholic, and many, many more. But how often do we actually stop and ask ourselves if those labels are true or if they're actually serving us well? What if you're not truly an empath, but you're just feeling depleted? What if saying my anxiety is reinforcing those very patterns that you're trying to escape? Well, in this episode of The Brain Changes, I'm joined by heart-led changemaker Maryanne Katsidis to challenge the labels that we place on ourselves and explore how language shapes our reality. Now, Maryanne brings her expertise in transformation and alignment to the conversation, helping us uncover how to move beyond limiting labels and create identities that empower us rather than hold us back. So strap in, because this conversation is really going to get you thinking differently about the language that you use. Welcome to The Brain Changes, a podcast about learning how to revolutionize the way you think and live by mastering your mind. We're your hosts, mother and daughter duo Rebekah and Yvonne King from Moonbeam Monday. Our goal is to empower you to live the life you choose by teaching you how to retrain your brain. Some people tell us it sounds like mind control, and it is, but not the way you might think. This is about you taking control of your own mind, rather than letting your mind control you, so you can choose to live a life free from the expectations of others. No matter what you've experienced in the past, you can create positive change and transformation by learning how to master your mind. We know this because we've done it. Between us, we've survived cancer and stroke and eliminated debilitating anxiety and depression. We've turned our pain into purpose through the power of our mind, and we're now here to support and guide you to do the same. In this podcast, we share valuable insights about how your brain works, why you think, say, and do the things you do, how to begin the process of change, and why it's necessary. Because we know that when you change your mind, you change your life. Thanks for joining us. Let's go. Hello and welcome to this episode of The Brain Changes. My name is Rebekah King, and I'm excited to be here today with a very dear friend of mine, Maryanne Katsidis. Hi, Maryanne.
Hi, beautiful.
I'm really excited to have you here. It's funny, we only really met kind of recently, but it's incredible the number of similarities that we've found, isn't it? Even I was thinking about this before this conversation. We even both like pineapple on pizza.
Everything so far is almost identical. It's a bit freaky.
I know, we're like sisters from another mister. Um, we, the reason we decided to do this today, Maryanne and I go for a walk on the beach almost every Monday morning. It's a really beautiful way to start our week. It gets us out in the fresh air, and we have these incredible conversations. And I know a couple of times we're like, we should be talking about this on the podcast. Because we both love sharing information and points of view. So I guess here we are talking about this particular topic today. But perhaps you can kick us off, Maryanne, by just introducing yourself, telling us a little bit about who you are and what you do and why you do it.
Well, firstly, thank you so much for having me on the show today. I love our conversations, and we're both chatterboxes, so I'm sure it's going to be an epic chat. But I work with visionary CEOs who've built success, but they feel like something deeper is misaligned. And I help them recalibrate their leadership energetically so that they can lead with clarity, with presence and legacy, not just performance. So it is something I'm very passionate about. I've got a background in kinesiology, in strategy, in marketing and leadership. So it's really a combination of all of my skills.
Yeah.
And I'm excited to talk to you. We've got plenty in common, and our philosophies are very similar too. So I'm looking forward to exploring this because I haven't seen this conversation anywhere else, and so I love that we get to talk about it today.
Yes, awesome. No, thank you for that. And I even noticed like we've got particularly one word in common when we look at our sort of our brand identity. We're both very, very much wanting to help provide clarity for people. Clarity is something that I'm finding so many people are searching for. And I think even when you find clarity in, your values, your direction in life, like we're always searching, right? Because it changes. Things evolve over time. So I love that we have that um, synchronicity in what we're doing and the types of people that we're helping. And of course, you also have your own podcast, which I've been lucky enough to be a guest on, the Heart-Led Changemakers podcast. So lots of great conversations happening there with some pretty incredible names, if I'm honest. I was scanning through it again recently and thought, this is cool. So, I want to perhaps just give some big background onto why we decided to have this conversation. Like you say, haven't seen this conversation had in a lot of places lately. And we were actually at an event together. You were on the panel, and one of the panelists there asked the room, "Who here is an empath?" And a number of women, of course, raised their hands. It was a female-only event, and this is the moment I had a moment where I thought, you know what, in the past I would have been one of those women raising my hands. I used to identify as an empath. I used to call myself an empath. But more recently, like, I feel a bit different about that. And I looked the word up because I truly wanted to understand it. I love a definition. And basically, what I discovered was that an empath is a person who is highly attuned to the energies and the emotions of those around them. And I thought, yep, okay, that's me. What else? And then it said something to the effect of empaths are said to feel what others are feeling so deeply that they absorb or they take on the emotions themselves. And it's often at the expense of their own emotional well-being. And I thought, okay, I used to feel this way. I I used to work in a very emotionally charged industry, like burnout, compassion fatigue. They were all a regular thing. And back then, I would have definitely described myself as an empath. But now, I'd say I'm empathetic. I show a lot of empathy when working with my clients, but I don't get stuck in the emotions of others. I can feel empathy toward a situation or toward a person, and then, once we're done with that conversation, I can walk away without holding on to it. So it made me think I'm not an empath, which of course got me thinking about all the other labels that we place on ourselves, which is why I wanted to chat to you about this. A big one, of course, in my line of work is I have anxiety. I hear this one a lot, and it's one of the first things I work on with my clients, helping them understand the impact of their language, uh, especially when it comes to identity. So I'd love to ask you this, Maryanne. Like you said, you're working with leaders and organizations, around transformation. So do you often see labels and language getting in the way of growth for those people?
Oh, Beck, that's an understatement. Everyone, I mean, the labels, like the label list has grown fundamentally, right?
Mm,
The thing is, the compassionate part of me understands why those labels exist.
hmm
And it is because people just truly want to be understood. They want they want it to easily communicate to somebody else who they are. And so these labels make it easier to say, hey, I'm this. So the other person has a heads up
Mm,
that they may have a specific operating system, let's say ADHD, anxiety, depression, whatever it is,
yeah.
empath, all of the things. The list is endless, and
Yeah.
it's getting more technical as we go along.
Yeah.
But what is problematic, and what I'm seeing in organizations and just in our society in general is people are hiding behind those labels. So it's actually it's multi-pronged. So the first
Mm,
prong is you've got the person saying I'm this, and therefore that is who they are, and they stay in that identity. And what it means is a lack of growth, which we can sort of dive into and talk about.
Yeah.
But then there's the other prong, and that is not trusting that the other person is going to be curious enough about you, or intuitive enough about you, or present enough with you to ask the questions to get the information. And
Mm.
so some of those labels is, it's sort of like forced laziness with communication, which is annoying because you
Mm.
and I are both very deep people. We don't play superficially. Our conversations are like we're swimming in the ocean, and it's amazing. And that's why we're, great friends and colleagues and all of the things. But I feel like we make it really easy for people to be lazy. And
Mm.
also, there's a distrust. And that distrust has come from the fact that people aren't choosing to be present. They're not choosing to be curious. So the person who's wanting to hide behind the label isn't really wrong. It's not that a great thing to do, but they're not wrong, because I mean, we've been to networking events where people just want to say I'm this, and then that's it.
Yeah.
And it's like, no, I get that you're saying to me, that you're a business advisor, for example, but who are you? Like, what are you passionate about? What I don't give a, and I'll, sorry for swearing, I don't give a shit what your label is. I don't care whether it's your job title
Mm.
or your anxiety label or any of those labels. Who are you underneath all of that? And so that those sort of arms to that label, it makes it very complex, very, very complex.
It is like oh God, there's so much in there, isn't there? That what you just said there, um, when somebody actually says, and like you say, we go to a lot of networking events, and a lot of people say, "Oh, the first question is, what do you do?" And I think I was even saying to you recently, I'm so sick of that question. The next person who asks me that, I'm going to say, I'm a dog walker because, I just want to see what their reaction is. But we're so focused on what people do. And this is about, this comes back to that statement about we're a human being, not a human doing. So we're very, very focused on what people do as opposed to who people are, or, who they are outside of their work, perhaps. And I get that at networking events, often we're there to talk about our work and what it is that we do. But we bring so much of ourselves. In fact, I would hope we bring our whole selves to our work. How do you actually answer that question when somebody says, yeah, okay, I know what you do, but who are you? Like Maryanne, who is Maryanne? How do you answer that question?
Well, I think you need to know who you are first. You need to know who you are, because when you know who you are, and when you've been deep diving and doing the internal work, your energy tells the story anyway. So
Mm.
you don't really have to answer that question. But if you're at, let's use the networking reference, because that's one of my favorite bugbears. So let's use that, because
Yeah,
that's something that most people can relate to, is being in environments or groups where you have to introduce yourself,
yeah,
and you've got the time frame, so you've got the clock ticking, and there's
yes,
a lot of pressure to perform, and that's what people are doing. They're performing,
yeah.
right? So they're talking from their headspace. They're not even talking from their heart space or from their sacral, like from their power center. They're talking from their head. So automatically, like I went to a networking event a few weeks ago, and everyone in the room were so basic and beige, and that sounds very judgmental, but that's factual,
Hmm.
that it was robotic. They said that week on week with no there was not a level of passion in the room at all, and it was boring, and it was actually heartbreaking,
Mm.
because they're doing themselves an injustice. But when someone says to you, "Who are you?" what does that mean to you? Like, when do you take that time to pause and ask yourself that internal question? I ask myself that question every day. I have that as part of my journaling in the morning, and I
Hmm.
sit there and I ask myself a specific series of questions. There's like 5 or 6 questions. So I can start to feel how I'm feeling. But if you wake up in the morning and you're on the go, and it's very hard to do if you've got children and so forth,
Mm,
and I get that. You got a lot of responsibilities. It's easy just to be on the fly. And so you don't give yourself that time and that grace to check in.
mm,
But pausing, even at the end of the day, at the beginning or the end, just to check in and sit with how you're feeling about yourself helps you better express and let someone else know what's important to you.
yeah.
I didn't say, when you asked me to introduce myself, I didn't say I was a business advisor because that is, I mean, that's the technical term.
Mm,
But that is not even close to what I do.
yeah,
I'm
it's so much more.
multi-dimensional.
Yeah.
I'm multi-dimensional. I channel. I'm intuitive. You could call me a witch if you want. That would be a compliment.
Yeah.
That's how, how you say I want to introduce myself as a dog walker. I'm dying to introduce myself as a witch. Like I'm going to challenge
Cool.
myself at some stage to do it, just for shock and awe, to
Yeah.
make sure people are awake and listening, right?
Well,
But
because they don't
I
understand what that means anyway, so it'd probably bring up a
no.
really interesting conversation, if nothing else.
Totally. And it's terrifying, that word.
Yeah.
Like, they'd be a deer in the headlights. But here's the interesting thing. When you are present and you are grounded and you are rooted in your energy and in your essence, that is terrifying to people anyway. People who are not present with themselves are scared to death that you can see through them. And generally you can because you're grounded. So your
Mm.
intuition is heightened, your knowing and your insight about what's going on around you is clearer. And that comes back to that clarity piece. The work that we do with our clients is
Mm.
bringing clarity. This is one of the ways.
Yeah. And I really like that you've given an actual example of how you do that. Someone who lives in this space, because, we talk about lots of different tools for reframing, changing your mindset, those types of things. So you actually sit there. This is a regular thing that you do. This is not something that you've done once and then you go, okay, I've got that sorted. This is something that you do on a regular basis. So for anybody who is asking that question, well, where do I even get started with this? That's the first thing, is actually giving yourself that time and that space. And, despite the number of responsibilities we all have, kids or no kids, full-time job, part-time job, caring for others, whatever it might be, we can all find 10 minutes in the day to do this. But I think often we avoid this because it is freaking uncomfortable if we're new to it, right? It brings up all sorts of feelings of, well, first of all, what if nothing comes to my mind? What if it's empty? Trust me, it won't be. What if I don't like what comes up? Which it can be really confronting. And I think that's the exciting part, actually. If we don't like what comes up, we can change that. We need guidance and we need support. This is the type of work that we do with our clients, right? We gently guide them because quite often there are a lot of answers inside us that we think, geez, I wish that was a little bit different. And that's the good news. We can actually change that. The Another thing I wanted to, something you said there just made me think about this. What kind of damage do you think this these labels or this identity, whatever it might be, you mentioned a whole lot of labels, there's about a gazillion more, like a technical term. What kind of damage do you think we're doing with ourselves by using these particular labels?
We're we're encouraging the laziness. That's what I was talking
Yeah.
about, the laziness in connection. But the big piece is that it's making people even more disconnected,
Yeah.
just just more separated. And then when you include the stuff around AI, it makes it even worse, right? Because
Mhm.
then um it's just so easy to stay disconnected. It's sort of like all of a sudden it's like being taken by a current. That's the visualization that I'm getting. It's like you're being all of a sudden you were in the shallows and all of a sudden now you're in the abyss, and it's isolating and it's lonely and you feel like no one really understands because that label doesn't really explain what is going on for you. That
Mm,
label doesn't explain how you're feeling. But, and that's why those questions in the morning are important because you're not even giving yourself time to sit with how you're feeling. We're so scared of how you're feeling. And I can honestly
mm,
say, hand on my heart, it has only been this year, and I'm about to turn 49 this year, that I have stopped running from my feelings. And I was a therapist for 8.5 years.
mm,
I have done more therapy than hundreds of thousands of dollars on different therapies of all the different things. But at the end of it, this was the piece that needed to settle and to stop. And it has been the game changer. But I see, and so I get it, right? I get being that person. So
mm,
there's definitely no judgment, but this
mm.
conversation is about highlighting something we're noticing and an opportunity for people to slow down. It's not about
Yeah.
doing more and being more and having more. It's just come back to how you feel. And that label isn't even doing you justice at all.
Mm.
That anxiety label, what does that really mean? What's that really telling somebody about what you need? They've got no idea what to do with
Yeah.
anxiety. And if they've
Yeah.
got anxiety as well, their version of anxiety and your version of anxiety are two different things. You might need just someone to listen. The other person might need a hug. They might need to do some grounding. It could be a number of different things. And so these these labels are ultimately, people think that they are going to feel connected and seen, but it's making them more disconnected. And that's what's troubling to me.
Yeah, yes, the disconnection, loneliness. I think, what did they say? We're more connected than ever, and yet we're more disconnected than we've ever been. So something to that effect, through social media, through, I had a conversation through Zoom last night with a friend in Singapore. How cool is that? We're doing it. We're not in the same space. We're doing this through Zoom. This is incredible. We're so connected technologically, but and I don't have the stats in front of me right now, but the statistic around people who feel lonely, even though we've got this incredible ability to connect, it's becoming a massive problem. And this, of course, does lead to things like anxiety conditions or depression. And I'm so familiar with those because I used to identify as someone with anxiety, someone with depression. And like I said at the when I introduced this, one of the first things that I work on with my clients when they come to me, because many of them are identifying as someone with anxiety. So it's about looking at what that is actually saying. So when I'm saying I have anxiety, it's like we're naming that. We're putting the condition, and I'm just going to use that term loosely, right? That condition before me as a person. So I was explaining this to a workplace group that I worked with last week. Said, in the industry that I came from, which was fundraising, the for purpose sector, I worked with guide dogs, and so we had autism assistance dogs. And from day one, it was drilled into me. We don't talk about autistic children. We talk about children with autism. We want to put the person before the thing, before the condition, if you want to call it a condition, right? Um, and then when I moved on to another organization, we worked with a lot of people with cancer and other illnesses. And that phrase of cancer patient, I mean, it's a horrible, horrible term. And all it does is identify this person like cancer. That's all you are, that's all you have. Instead of this is a person living with cancer, or insert any illness or disease here. And when I was able to explain it to this group like that, so, if we're talking about anxiety, we can reframe this into I'm a person who has anxious thoughts from time to time, as opposed to I have anxiety. And instantly you could see this, ah. I've never thought about it like this before. One of the women there who has kids, she actually said, yeah, actually, it's the same as, when you've got kids and you have to tell them off because they've done something naughty, it's explaining to them, you're not a bad person. It's just the action that you've chosen. You might not say it like this to a kid, but the action that you've chosen to take here is not the right thing to do. So you're still a good person, but this was a poor choice. So we're putting the person before the condition. And, especially with things like anxiety, depression, when we identify, it's like that's all we are. So it's like saying everything that I do, or every action that I take is going to have some sort of form of anxiety around it, as opposed to I simply have anxious thoughts from time to time. So I can now say I do not identify as someone with anxiety. Doesn't mean I don't feel anxious from time to time when the situation warrants it.
Absolutely. And that's the same with empathy, right?
Yes.
Empathy is even worse because empathy, I have referenced myself in the years past as an
Hmm.
empath. That
Hmm.
I heard that term early on in my self-development side of things, and I stuck with it. That became my label. I'm an empath. Therefore, all these terrible things that are happening to me is because I'm too sensitive.
Yeah.
And I feel like a lot of the time that word alone puts you in victim
Yes.
rather than I am empathetic of other people
Yes.
is different from I am an empath. I am an
Yes.
empath means then you are on the receiving end and like I said, a victim. And that is disempowering.
Mm.
When you're looking at self-development, when you're looking at doing, when you're working with any coaches or any natural therapies, anything like that, there should be an empowered mode rather than keeping you in a state where you're just treading water. And I'm sure you've had experiences with people that you've worked with before, same with me too, where I didn't feel like I was moving out of that. And in fact, I probably did too much with the wrong people to keep me in that state. I am a highly sensitive person.
Hmm.
Highly sensitive. My energy it picks up on what's happening around me so actively because I spend time cultivating my energy in that space. I'm mindful of it, and just now, I've been like that since I was a kid.
Hmm.
But where it becomes problematic is when you fall into I'm an empath, and that means then you don't have to set boundaries. You don't have to take
Mm.
responsibility for your part of what is going on, and it
Yes.
allows you to be mistreated all the time. And so when we heard that sort of question in that at that networking event, I don't know that the women in that room would have been thinking about it like that. And again, that's obviously what kickstarted this conversation because we were intrigued by that
Yes.
concept.
Yeah. And that you've nailed it there. It's potentially, like you said, putting us in this victim mindset. That's of course, we've talked about this in a previous podcast. It's living in effect rather than living at cause. So it's seeing the world through a view of life is happening to me as opposed
Yeah.
to life is happening for me. What can I learn from this? And granted, when something bad has happened, as will always happen, like we're always going to have
Of
stressful
course.
situations, bad things are going to happen, right? There's no getting away from that. We're not just here to think positively and, fluffy. We are realists as well. But and it is hard sometimes to think, what can I actually take from this? What lesson can I learn from this when we are deep in the shit, essentially, and we're thinking, seriously, how can I find something good from this? I think it's important to give ourselves some time and some compassion there. You may not get it right there and then. It may even take years sometimes. I talk about this in my keynote about, when my dad died, which is a long time ago now, about 30 years ago. And at the time, do you think I could see anything good in that? I was 16 years old. There's no way I could see a positive in that. But as time, bless you, as time has gone on, There are so many lessons that have come from that. I think even things that I can see in a positive light doesn't mean that I wish it hadn't happened, doesn't mean that I would change it if I had any power over it, but I choose to see it in a different light. So this is looking at life as though it's happening for us. What can I learn as opposed to that, in effect, um, everything bad happens to me? Because of course,
Yep.
speaking of energy, and it's a famous saying, I think, from Tony Robbins, where the focus goes, energy flows, right? If we
Yeah.
think in those terms, everything bad happens to me, guess what? You are just going to attract those bad things. Everything that happens is going to seem like it's happening to you.
Yep.
So,
And
yeah,
it's hard to do. It's hard to do when you're in the thick of it, right?
yes,
But this is where the discipline, the self-discipline comes in, because it's not about restricting yourself more. And the problem is people are restricting themselves left or right. So they want to escape, right? So they're looking for all the tools like food, over
yes,
exercising, alcohol, gambling, drugs, porn, all of
shopping.
the things. Shopping, online shopping, God, that's the easy one. And
Yeah.
there's no shame because no one really knows what's going on there. Um, but it is um, those tools are a distraction from how you're really feeling. But if you stay with it and you just stop for half an hour, not even, when you are starting to feel the intensity of it and just asking, what is this trying to teach me?
Yeah.
Just pause with it, then you're more likely going to feel some respite and or some clarity. And I read because I've been so fascinated about this since we started this conversation down at the beach. But I read if you don't pause to acknowledge how you're feeling when you have an emotional flare up within the first half an hour, it stays around for sometimes up to years.
Yeah,
Like
wow, years.
like how annoying would that be, right? When you could have just dealt with it right then and there, but because we're so consumed to escape, the feelings feel too intense.
Yeah.
2 and 3 year olds are the best teachers for this, right? They
Yes.
feel so much they've learned it. The emotions are really high and they're having a tantrum and it's just too much
Yeah,
and
it
they
has to
throw
come out,
themselves on the
right?
ground,
Yeah.
right? But you just be present with them, right? Instead of trying to rush them through. And I think uh now more parents are conscious not to do that because they know what it's like.
Yeah.
But that just being with yourself, pretend you're the 2 or 3 year old. Be
Yeah.
with yourself for at least 20 to 30 minutes and then let it go. And you'll
Yeah.
find you'll come good. Like it may even happen sooner than that. I'm saying allow up to 30 because that's what I read, but it may be 10 minutes is all you need just to go, I feel really sad. And
Yeah.
I actually am talking from experience, right? Because I've had to train myself to do this. No one has been better at running from their feelings than me. I would have had multiple trophies, award winning, you know, trophy.
Congratulations.
Thank you. Yeah. It's something I'm really proud of because it's a hard thing to do, right?
Yeah.
It was exhausting, but I did it. It was like a marathon. But
Yeah.
when you actually when you actually choose to stand still, um, that gift is all that is needed. That's all that you need to do for yourself. Nothing more than that. But acknowledging that you're sad is challenging. Acknowledging that you're mad because when you've been taught to be the good girl,
Mm.
when and we're of that vintage where back then, it was like be good, don't, smile because I told you you
Be on your
have
best
to.
behavior. Yeah.
You can't walk into that room looking like that,
Mm.
so we learn how to perform.
Yeah.
And now because of the labels, and this is, how it all sort of connects. Now because of the labels, it's like, oh, well, I don't have to perform, but now I can hide. And it's
Mm.
really the same thing. It's just with another mask.
Yeah, that whole conversation, I love that about taking that time to actually feel the feelings. Of course, we've been taught, we've been conditioned. This is all the work that I do with peeling back the layers of the onion, essentially. We've been conditioned. We've held on to these things mainly because that's what we've been taught to do with those, even those subtle things like, oh, it's okay, don't cry. It seems in the moment a good thing to say, but actually it has this effect on our unconscious, and we hold on to that belief. Okay, if I cry, I'm bad, or something bad might happen. And so taking that time, and actually I remember this from way back. I'd have to actually check the specifics on this, but we feel that uncomfortable with our emotions or even with other people's emotions. But in fact, a full out outburst like that generally only lasts maximum of 12 minutes. So if you think about that, 12 minutes in the grand scheme of things, and we could feel uncomfortable, but ask anyone, and I'm talking to all of our listeners right now. We've all had a big cry before, right? Over something. You've stopped crying at some point, right? Because you've run out. Like you've run out of, you're tired. It happens with kids as well. They tire themselves out, right? So the emotion doesn't last forever. And I know it can feel, especially when we're not used to doing it, it can feel super uncomfortable. And we think, and I've heard this before, I think I even used to say this to myself, but if I start, I don't think I'll be able to stop. Like, so if it's like if you let the cap off a Coke bottle, it does, it fizzes over. It go, you've shaken it up, you take the cap off and it goes psh, but it stops at some point, right? It will actually stop. So, the one thing that I want to say here to people listening, going, yeah, but if I take the lid off that, I'm really worried that I'm not going to be able to get the lid back on. We don't actually want to put the lid back on, right? We want
Yeah.
to allow these things to come out, because putting the lid on, like you said, it's actually going to stay with us for years. It will come out some way, somehow, sometime. And for a lot of us, that comes out in illness or
Yeah.
disease later on in life, or it could even just like chronic aches and pains. It's going to come out in our body or our mind in some way. So that advice
Or
to,
like
yeah,
or like anxiety,
yes,
or you know some of the other behavioral symptoms like
yes,
depression, etc., is because they've been ignoring and suppressing how they were feeling way back when. And I
exactly.
just wanted to add before we jump off, like move on,
Yeah,
um sometimes the beginning part, when you're being still with your feelings and letting that bottle cap go,
mm,
yes, initially, truth be told, there can be a bit of an outpour,
yeah,
and that takes grace and compassion for the self to be willing and able to just be with it, and to trust that whoever's facilitating you through that process, and you do this beautifully with your clients,
thank you.
just choosing to be with it for a little while. And again, none of those feelings last for long, but it's like, not to be disgusting, but it's kind of like squeezing a zit, right? It looks gooey. There's a big head on there. Everyone can see. You have to squeeze it to release it.
Yeah.
But it hurts initially. Of course it does. And there's a lot of gunk that comes out.
But
But
it's
then
so
the healing,
satisfying.
it
It's
is
this
satisfying.
feeling of
But
relief.
yeah, but then there's this big giant red thing on your face, but then it starts to heal,
Yeah,
right? Then it's got time for healing. Then it needs some nurturing. It needs some tea tree. It needs some moisture. It
yeah,
needs, maybe some ice even, just to calm it all down. It needs gentleness and time. And
yes,
that's what happens when you release that cap. But
yeah,
it doesn't make sense to just leave it so that it turns into a boil or something else. Do you know
yeah,
what I mean? It is important that, yes, it's not going to be, oh, I'll just deal with this and then I don't have to think about
yeah.
any of the other things that have ever happened to me.
We've got
But
to
it's
show it
not
some
about
love.
but it's not about excavating all those other things either. It's just allowing whatever's supposed to come out and come through.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think you said this before as well. Sometimes the 2 and the 3-year-old, they're really good at just expressing their emotions. And then, then they move on and they get on with life. We're the ones as adults that are like, oh my goodness, how do I deal with this? But I've done this work even with a few clients recently, that some of the work I do with timeline therapy. And we're looking for the source of the issue. So, anxiety, depression, all of these things that we're talking, well, that I talk about in this podcast in general, they are the symptom, right? They're not the actual problem. We go and look for the root cause. When's the first time that we felt this or that we had this thought? Because we want to detach you from that emotion because they're the emotions that we've stored. And quite often, a lot of people would know this as inner child work, for example. And sometimes when we find that initial time or that initial thing, a simple question that I ask is, what does 5-year-old Maryanne need right now? And so often she just needs a hug or she just needs to be told that it's okay. And so we do that. It to some people it sounds a bit woo-woo, some people it sounds naff. I don't care. It works, right? And sometimes that's all we need to do, and then we're able to disengage from that emotion. And I tell you what, the results that you get when you actually take the time to give that younger you what she or he needed back then, and you can do it even though you're not there anymore, it's quite incredible. I've worked with clients who have completely changed the way that they think, the way that they feel, the way that they behave. They've made incredible changes, powerful changes in their life simply from that small piece of the puzzle, that small piece of love that they've given. So,
Yeah. I, I've even done that with dating, right? So when
yeah.
I after my divorce and I started dating, I found I was having uh, the feelings of anxiety were palpable. I couldn't breathe. I was sweaty. I was nervous. I was trying on 700 outfits, not feeling like I was good enough. And I was in this sort of spiral. And I decided to start being present with my inner child.
Hmm.
And not only that, but my teen self. So the teen self is when the dating started. So when you're talking about timelines, I realized, okay, well, all of this would have started then. There would be issues that she is having or she's wanting to express or things she didn't get to do or say or be.
Hmm.
And and so I would actively sit in my mind's eye, obviously with my eyes closed, whatever, but I'd have a conversation with my little self, little MA, and
Hmm.
my teen self. And I'd ask them how they were feeling and what they needed. And the panic that they were in was
Hmm.
what was driving those anxiety feelings, what was making me feel uneasy and ungrounded. And so just acknowledging what was going on for them meant that I could remind them
Hmm.
and compassionately just give to myself so that I could just calm down. And
Hmm.
that was something that's a hard thing to do, right? Because it's
Yeah.
like talking to your own kids, but it's versions of you.
Yeah.
But it's like, okay, well, we're not going, you don't, you acknowledge it like you would with your own children. You'd say, okay, I see why you would be feeling like that. But what if we could do A, B, C, and D? And what would you like? And so I'd let them be in on what I'd wear, and
Yeah.
I'd let them be in on some of the decisions, and I'd get them excited about things like you would with kids.
Yeah.
And so that self-coaching is it was an absolute game changer. And even still now, sometimes when I'm going into environments where I know it's going to challenge and stretch me a little bit because I'm breaking, and we will forever because I'm constantly going to be doing the internal work. I do that as a way of supporting myself when I go into environments where I feel like I'm going to start performing
Hmm.
rather than being. I
Mm-hmm.
challenge myself to go back to that and go, but why do you feel like you need to? Like,
Mm.
what is it that, what do you think that's going to happen? And what it does is, and this is like such a key thing with this um, technique, is it builds self-trust
Mm.
because the whole reason you are feeling the things, all the emotions is because you're self-abandoning. And when you stop self-abandoning, that's when the magic happens. But you need, in order to do that, you need to be present with your current self, your present self, but also the version of you that's on a timeline that doesn't exist right now. But
Mm.
your brain is saying, oh shit, this is going to happen to me again. Not
Mm.
again. Oh no,
Yeah.
I'm going to get hurt.
Yeah.
Oh no, I'm going to be abandoned. Oh no, they're not going to like me. And it's like, no, 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 no.
Yeah.
And it's not saying no to them, it's acknowledging it, but it's like, well, no, we don't have to re-have that experience. And if,
No.
say, for example, you did feel a sense of rejection, that person doesn't like you. Okay, well, what does that what's really going to change? Like, that just means that that person isn't right for you. And these conversations, as like you said, as woo-woo as it sounds, it is a gift. But again, you have to take 5, 10, 15 minutes out of your day to be still with yourself, to acknowledge it instead of running,
Yeah.
diluting,
Avoiding.
disconnecting,
Yes.
avoiding, escaping.
That's right. Yeah. Yeah, it's some really insightful points there, Maryanne, and I love that you've given us so much of your own learnings from this. You've done the work, you're doing the work, like you say. We're all doing the internal work constantly. We've done a lot of it. We might have a break from time to time because it is tiring, and then we keep
Of
doing it,
course.
right? I want to just bring us back to what we were talking about at the beginning, especially to do with empathy or being an empath. So I think in the intro we talked about, and this was my own personal experience as well. Instead of identifying as an empath, I realized actually that years ago, back when I used to say, yes, I'm an empath, I realized that I was actually just quite depleted, or I can see it from a different perspective now. I was burnt out. I did have compassion fatigue. There was so many people that I worked with in that industry that I lost just simply because of the type of people that I was around. I was depleted. I was grieving, all of these things, and I think I thought that I was taking all of these emotions on from other people, but actually it was my own emotions. And you mentioned sensitivity earlier. So, what are the signs do you think that someone might be depleted rather than being deeply sensitive? And how can we tell the difference?
Yeah, so what just just wanted to comment on what you said about what happened for you with the
Yeah.
empathy side of things. For me, it was I didn't realize I was highly intuitive
Yeah.
and I wasn't willing and didn't understand and wasn't willing to see that I didn't have any boundaries or self-worth. Right.
Right.
And so that combination created my version of I'm an empath. So
Yes.
it can come in different forms. So I think the first sort of thing to do is to acknowledge what version of empathy are you labeling yourself? What needs to be acknowledged there? Is it the fact that I'm not looking at my grief and
Mhm.
I'm wanting to jump into the well with all these other people's issues? Is it the overgiving, which was one of my brilliant, wonderful traits?
Yeah.
We've recently broken up, overgiving and I, but it is, so much so. This is how ingrained that program was. I've got a whiteboard behind my computer screen,
Yeah.
and in big, bold letters at the moment, it says be selfish underlined. Because I have to remind myself to be selfish, but that
Mm.
selfish is actually just what's normal.
Yeah.
It's not being empathetic. It's just having boundaries
Yes.
and letting my intuition guide what happens and how I support others, right? So I feel
Mm.
like that part. But to answer your question, how do you know? You know because you are in complete and total exhaustion. You know
Mm.
because your cortisol levels are skyrocketing through the roof. You
Mm.
know, because you're reaching for all the external things, like we were saying, alcohol, food, online shopping, men, women, whatever it is for you, the external for validation, for comfort.
Hmm.
That's how you know that you've gone way too far. And when you're dysregulated in that space, chaos tends to come with it. Chaos and really hard, beautiful lessons tends to come. And that's how you know that you need to reassess what is going on, because that chaos is the thing that tells the story for the misalignment. And that's
Mm.
that they're the conversations that I have with CEOs and the people that I work with. Is it's not working harder, it's not putting more rules in. It is, where are you misaligned that's creating this disconnection in your communication, in your
Mm.
connection with others. And with CEOs, for example, they're leading huge amounts of, staff. Well, where are you disconnected? Where are you hiding behind your mask, behind your
Mm.
label, to keep yourself protected, when actually it's actually just causing chaos? And
Yeah.
so it is, again, it is a choice that everyone gets to make, to deep dive and just get curious on what is it really that's sitting underneath this. And it's just asking one question and then just asking yourself another one. I
Mm.
start the day with, I feel, right? And it's amazing how day to day you feel completely different. As soon as your eyes open, I feel. Sometimes I feel exhausted. Sometimes I feel gloomy. How am I gloomy when I just opened? Nothing has even happened
Yeah.
yet.
And that's
What do
where
you
that
mean I feel
that
gloomy?
question after the statement is the most important, isn't it? Because
Right?
it's that I'm exhausted. Well, that is going to perpetuate that feeling of exhaustion. I'm gloomy.
Yeah,
That's going to set that in. It's like the bad weather setting in, it sets in for the
totally.
day type of thing. So that next
Totally.
question, well, what is actually going on underneath here that's creating this feeling of exhaustion, as opposed to just
Exactly.
owning that I'm exhausted?
And the best and worst part is, you can suppress with alcohol, for example, which is most people's go-to when they're in fight flight mode and
Hmm.
overwhelmed and sad. But then our beautiful brains have this component called subconscious. So while you're sleeping, guess what? Your brain, you may think you have disconnected, but your subconscious is
Yeah.
still trying to play out and resolve those underlying feelings. So when you wake up, that
Mm.
is why some acknowledgement needs to happen, and checking in to just checking in with, how is my body feeling
Mm.
today? How does my
Mm.
body feel? Do I feel a bit stiff in the back there? Why do I feel stiff? What can I do to relax it? Just
Mm.
being being still and just being is a good first spot. But yes, chaos is the telltale.
Yeah. Okay.
Drama and chaos and things turning to crap is usually the telltale that you've gone too far.
And we need to wind it back. And I think that's a
Yeah.
really good point to finish on, where you said, because I was going to say, what's a takeaway for our listeners today? And I really think taking that being still. So I know it's going to scare the shit out of some people to be still, or to take the time, or to make the time. And there's going to be loads of excuses flying out of your mouth right now, I'm sure, listeners. We all do it. I'm not. This is no judgment. We all do it, Maryanne and myself included. I'd like to think that we have enough awareness that we go, all right, there's an excuse flying out. What is it that I can change about this? So that's what I want to leave people with, is if there's one thing that you can start with, it is making that time to be still, to check in with your whole body, get out of the head, check in with the whole body. How am I feeling right now? Where is this
Yeah.
coming from? What is there a deeper sense here? What's actually underneath this exhaustion, this sadness, this anxious thought? And remembering to just reframe those things in a slightly different way. You're not an anxious person. You're a person that has anxious thoughts from time to time. Yeah.
And not just that, but it seems like, journaling or writing stuff down about how you're feeling seems really self-indulgent,
Mm.
but that takes about 5 or 10 minutes to do that. But when you think about how much time people are spending on their phones, scrolling for hours, and 45 minutes, you can rack 45 minutes up really quickly.
Yeah.
I think you can make that choice. I
Oh,
think
look,
you can.
you brought up two of my favorite words, choice and curiosity, definitely. But
Yeah.
look, I always challenge if we're talking about finding time and somebody says, I don't have a spare 10 minutes in my day, give me a call, give Maryanne a call, we'll find it for you. We'll find it just like that.
Just like that.
Just like that.
100%. Yeah.
Maryanne, if people want to hear more of these conversations with you, where can they find you?
Well, they can tune in to the podcast, Heart-Led Changemakers. That's on all the streaming platforms, including YouTube.
Uh-huh.
And you can find me on social media, even though I don't really want you to be on
I
social
know
media as much.
we
You
struggle
can
with
find
that,
me
don't
there.
we?
At least just look at it, look at Beck's post and my post, and then get off for your daily dose of inspiration. My Instagram handle is my name, Maryanne Katsidis, and my website is maryannekatsidis.com. So you can find me there
Awesome.
as well.
And we will put all of those details in the show notes as well. Maryanne, thank you so much. I've loved this conversation. You and I could keep going for hours and hours, but for the sake of our listeners, we will wind this up today. No doubt we'll have another conversation another time. Thank you for your insights today, for your recommendations, suggestions, and just simply for being here and giving us your time. I really appreciate it. And thanks to everybody
Thank
for
you. Thank
listening
you.
to The Brain Changers. It's great to have you here again. And remember, when you change your mind, you change your life. Bye for now. Thanks for listening to this episode of The Brain Changers. We hope you've enjoyed the conversation today. Please like and subscribe to stay up to date with all the latest episodes. Our mission is to reach as many people as possible to help them revolutionize the way they think so they can change their brain and create profound transformation. Please help us broaden our reach by sharing this episode with someone you know will benefit. And remember to tag us on socials at Moonbeam Monday and leave a review. And remember, when you change your mind, you change your life. We'll catch you next time for another episode of The Brain Changers.